I don't like blackboard. Hi, Seamus. Can you hear me?
You and me both.
Yeah, I think it's hi Nicole. If you're there.
Hi.
I think it's the worst. Sorry, I just think it's really terrible. So Nicole, Seamus and I asked to be put together because the last time we had maybe 6 people show up and it was very lonely.
Oh, yeah, I understand that.
Yeah. And we have, very few people. Maybe there will be more people that show up. Garima's coming in.
So welcome to Garima, Lauren, Lily, and Milan. So it's really your session. So
My
please
session?
feel
Oh,
free.
their session, yes.
Their session.
Yeah. So Seamus, when I did the session last month, students put either put on their audio to talk, or, and I'm mentioning this to the participants, Garima, Lauren, Lily, and Milan, or put questions in the chat that I answered. And also students are, in and out of the sessions, going into other sessions as well. So maybe putting comments in the chat might be, or questions, specific questions.
Whatever they're comfortable with.
Might be good. So specific things that you're interested in.
So while we're waiting, Liz, let me ask you a question that I've been thinking about all day today. It's whether or not CIPS takes a more sociological perspective and C&T a more humanities perspective on the same kinds of issues.
I would say in general, yes, but not always. I would say maybe C&T might take a bit of a more theoretical approach, and the methods might be more qualitative, but that's also not necessarily the case for everything. I would say there may be different methods of knowledge mobilization. I'm just, in some ways, in culture and technology, some of the knowledge mobilization might be a bit more creative than it would be in CIPS. And CIPS might, knowledge mobilization, try to be more in terms of shaping policy and shaping public opinion about specific policy issues.
Yeah, I was wondering from another side whether or not CIPS looks more at the social systems aspect, and culture and technology looks more at the human systems aspect.
Yeah, I would say that you could differentiate between CIPS and C&T in that regard. Although certainly, in CIPS, it's, a lot of it is also about the socio-technical implications of policy and its impact on different sorts of populations. But I would say so. Garima has a question. Let me read this, please.
Thanks, Leslie.
Yeah, no, thank you, Seamus. It's a great question. Garima, where is a master's in media governance from? Because that's quite interesting. You can just put it in the chat. I'm just curious there.
Yeah. Go ahead and speak, Garima. It's okay.
Hello, thank you so much for your time. I pursued the Masters in Media Governance from Jamia Millia Islamia. It's a central university in India, New Delhi.
Okay, great. No, I was just very curious because we don't, in North America, while there's, master's programs in media studies, often the media governance, there's people do that, but there's no sort of titles called media governance, so I didn't think it was in North America, so that's excellent. I can speak from CIPS in terms of thinking about how policy and governance has changed since 2016. And just thinking about the last 6 weeks alone, I cannot keep up with all of the new events and policy moments that are happening. So in CIPS, it's constantly, the core course I teach is constantly, while I might have the same themes that I'm looking at year to year, the literature that I'm looking at, the policy examples that I'm looking at are changing all the time. So I would say since 2016, in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been more of an emphasis on thinking about the governance piece of how do we rein in these large technological firms and these monopolies. There's more of a way of thinking about that in a global perspective. I would say the power and the impact of the platform companies in terms of fomenting disinformation, misinformation, political polarization has been so intense, and this is why there's so many policy moments and thinking about whether and how is the best appropriate ways to regulate technology. I would say there's more of a public consciousness about surveillance and surveillance capitalism in our everyday lives. That is really quite interesting. There's more efforts to think about creating robust digital literacy programs. So it's a really exciting time for CIPS and the sorts of issues that we're dealing with. Just thinking about, as I said, in the last 6 weeks alone, thinking about updated privacy legislation that's proposed in Canada, thinking about Senate Judiciary reports coming out from the United States about the regulation and whether or not to enact antitrust against the big tech monopolies, events coming out of the EU as well, ethics of AI, AI regulation, AI governance, which has an impact, thinking about our human-centered data centered concentration. All of these things are really quite exciting. From the CIPS perspective, I don't know what you think, Seamus, I would say it's also a more popular discourse about this, but in terms of the scholarship, it's just become much more interdisciplinary and much more proactive in thinking about the issues, but also thinking about the cultural imaginaries of data, the cultural imaginaries of algorithms, and how this shapes our everyday lives. So it's a great question, Garima. Seamus?
I would just add one little gloss to that, and it's that taken from a culture and technology point of view, we would look at what it is to be human, and agency and identity in particular as being core issues. How does surveillance and privacy affect agency of individuals, affect their identity? What are digital rights? And how are they transforming the human? And how do we even protect what rights we have? In some countries you cease to own your DNA? In other contexts, your DNA comes to be your identity, so you become your genotype rather than your phenotype, which is a fascinating area of study. Also, in terms of the notion of privacy, what is privacy even now? Yeah. And do we have a right to privacy anymore? or can we expect it? These are all reshaping our culture. If once you cease to recognize a right to privacy, your whole cultural world changes.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's a great. Yeah.
In the marketplace.
Sorry, I had another device on my desk, and it
And I
heard
heard
me.
you talking.
I used some word, I forget which it is, and it triggers the device to kick off and to start looking around for
So what
information.
device? What device do you have? Who makes the device? What
No,
company?
it's actually just a Samsung tablet,
Oh,
and
okay.
it's got Bixby on it, and I forget.
Okay.
There's a word that I put a word into it, one I hoped I very rarely used, but once I used the word, it kicked off, and
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, so just one thing, Garima, in terms of what Professor Ross or Seamus has said, we'll just refer to each other by first names here. The cultural considerations and the comparative cultural considerations of technology and policy in our everyday lives and the different ways that we're using it, I think is a really key element that is incredibly important, as well as intergenerational issues in terms of how we use these technologies.
so maybe you want to start with the
The courses?
courses? Yeah.
Sure. There's 5 core courses in CIPS. One is Knowledge and Information in Society. All of the courses, all of the course syllabi from the last couple of years are available somewhere on our website. You look up where the courses are, and there's listings of the various syllabi. I don't think the 2020 ones or the fall 2020 ones are up yet. But in Knowledge and Information Society, I treat it as a sort of general introduction to a lot of the issues that we deal with in CIPS, and each year I focus on current controversies, whether it be, surveillance capitalism or issues of technopoles and gentrification. So, or issues of AI governance and ethics, smart cities, a range of different sorts of issues. So there's Knowledge and Information Society. There's a course on information policy, regulation, and law, which, depending on who teaches it, can have a different inflection in terms of the policy issues that are being considered. It can be a more traditional information policy, thinking about intellectual property, privacy issues, access to information, or when I taught it, it had more of a digital policy inflection. There's a course that is shared amongst culture and technology and CIPS, which is the histories of information and communication technology. So looking at the historical development, design, social uses, policy implications of ICTs. There is a course on knowledge. It's a research course, 2242. The title eludes me right now, but it is often used as the methods course that students use if they are going to do a thesis and they need a methods course. But it's looking a lot at different forms of thinking about knowledge and media from a science and technology perspective. Political economy is a required course, so looking at the political economy of media and information systems. And I think, did I name 5 there? I think I named the 5 there that are taught, that are the core courses.
Okay. So in culture and technology, there's an introductory course which gives you the frame for talking about 1501. It gives you the frame for talking and reasoning about what culture is, and its relationship to technology and vice versa. There's a course called Critical Making, which is taught by actually the pioneer of that discipline, which is fairly widely known now, but Matt Ratto was one of the key definers of the field, and it looks at social values, physical computing, and gives you a domain in which to experiment with and understand the process by which that interrelationship between culture and technology takes place. Then you'll take either a course on the future of the book or remix technologies. The future of the book looks at how technology is reshaping the way we interact with information, the way we construct it and disseminate it. Remix culture does a similar sort of does a similar sort of approach, but it does it from the point of view of a broader range of cultural of technologies, from art to music to film. You would take an information workshop, which you'll do no matter what concentration you take. Two information workshops, no matter what concentration you pursue, and those range from information behavior through to Colin Furness is actually teaching a new one this year on the pandemic and the information in the pandemic. I'm teaching one on the carbon footprint of information, and there are I think 10 others that are being taught as well. And then Leslie already told you about the critical histories of information that's a shared course between C&T and CIPS. Then finally, you take in the last semester capstone course on culture and technology, where you actually explore some specific aspect of culture and technology, and you produce a major research paper as part of that, or a project of some kind. You really define that in conjunction with the person the instructor in the course. So I hope that answers that question.
There's also, I'd like to mention, there's also lots of, if you look on the various course calendar through the years, there's a lot of elective courses that are offered. So there's lots of elective courses that, there's a lot of elective courses that are shared between C&T and CIPS. I'm thinking of the remix culture. Although actually remix culture may be required for a C&T, I can't remember. But there's also a surveillance and identity course that hasn't been taught in a few years, but this is an elective courses, so they're elective courses on the books. They're not necessarily taught each year. There's a lot of special topics that are being offered each year, and because we have the very large graduate faculty members that their graduate home is in our faculty, and they're from ICC, IT, and ACM at UTSC and UTM, the topics and the flavor tend to be much more C&T and CIPS related. So for instance, this year, a colleague, Alessandro Del Fonte, is teaching a course on digital. Patrick Keelty, now he's one of our professors in the LAS concentration, but his course in digital discourse is very popular, and students from CIPS and C&T take that. Critical histories, studies of social media is being taught by so that's very much related to the two concentrations. In winter, Sherry Yu is teaching critical approaches to multiculturalism, information, and social integration. There's copyright for information professionals, could be of interest to C&T students. There's a really cool course on outer space. Outer space communication, taught by Marie-Pierre Boucher. Julie Chen, teaching a course on platforms, so thinking about platform culture, platform studies, which is a big focus now. She's looking at this from a theoretical and global historical perspective. And there's a new colleague that, the new colleague is in the UX, Chandra, is Professor Chandra. It's called Information and Communication Technologies, Design and Marginality. So there's a lot of interesting courses that our students are able to take in the different, across the faculty, all to say.
So I just want to pick up on another. Thank you, that was great. I just want to pick up on another question that was asked. I don't know why I have an echo. And it's what types of undergraduate programs the C&T students come from? Well, first of all, the one thing about it, the Faculty of Information and a degree in the field of information is that it doesn't really matter what undergraduate degree you have. It helps you to, the graduate degree will help you to work out new ways of seeing your undergraduate degree. So if you came to C&T from biology, you might ask very different questions than if you came to C&T from history, and similarly for CIPS itself. So I wouldn't be concerned about the undergraduate program you have. I would think the programs that you come from give you a special asset that you can capitalize on as you, terrible word, capitalize on, that you can build on as you investigate the issues from C&T. And also, it should give you a set of knowledge domains that you can ask framing questions about. So if you came from biology and you'd studied things like in vitro fertilization, you could start to ask questions about the cultural impact of that technology on society and on familial relationships and so forth from a human perspective. If you came from history, you might look at the relationship between emerging technologies of social interaction and the impact of the history of printing technologies, just for example. Or you might be interested in the notions of time and how time has, from a historical perspective, how our understanding of time has changed and how that has reshaped culture. Our students, as I said, have gone into the consultancy, government departments, health services, with a big emphasis, I think, on the consultancy aspect.
Yeah. Oh, there's big echo here.
Why is that?
Following up from Seamus, the Faculty of Information is a professional program, and students come to the program at different points in their lives. Some come directly from a master's degree, some come directly from an undergraduate degree, some come from another master's degree. Some students come with a PhD already and they want to get the professional degree, they want to work in an academic library, so because it's an ALA accredited degree, they come to the program. Students are coming from, the social sciences, they are coming from the humanities, they're coming from the sciences, they're coming from such a vast array of different academic disciplines in their previous degree. There's also, students are coming after working for several years in a professional capacity. Some students are coming after working for many, many years in a professional capacity and wanting to retool, rethink what they want to do. So, it's a vast array of different sorts of students that come to the program at different points in their lives, which makes it incredibly lively, incredibly exciting, and students learn from each other. And so when I approach the classes that I teach at the Faculty of Information, I cannot assume that everybody comes from the same disciplinary background. Yeah.
That can make the classes more exciting, right, Leslie? The fact that
Absolutely. No, it can make it very exciting. It can often also make it challenging to teach. It's one can't come with preconceived notions of what the student knowledge base will be, but it's exciting. You learn a lot from the students.
I'll just maybe add one comment about you could bear in mind two other points about both programs. Yeah, they are complementary. You could take both concentrations. That's one. The second point that I'd like to actually remind you is that you can look outside the faculty for up to 4 courses from other departments in the university. which, for example, if you were interested in C&T, you might want to take a course in ethnography in anthropology, or you might like to take a course in politics or sociology. So you can look beyond the faculty to build and construct an exciting program and develop your knowledge domains. And also, Leslie picked up a very important point. It was about the methodologies we actually use within these concentrations. And you can extend your methodological experience by looking beyond the faculty for other programs. So, because when you leave, it would be good to go out of an MI program with a rich theoretical and methodological background, because that becomes a tool chest that you carry from place to place to help you contribute to society, but also to your employment. The other point that I really wanted to make, it had something to do with remix culture and the history of the book. They are both, in a way, complementary courses. In C&T, we say take one or the other, but you can take both, and they both offer different perspectives. And I am particularly keen on the remix culture one, having taught it a couple of times myself, because it really allows you to think very differently about the components of culture, our cultural products, and how we can put them together in creative ways. So I think that there's much there. Leslie, maybe you can answer the question about CIPS and overlap with law.
Yeah, we don't really have an overlap with law. If you're thinking that we might have shared courses with the Faculty of Law and Faculty of Information, we do not. At some point, there was a joint MI law program, but I think that was several years ago, and I'm not quite sure what happened with that program, Seamus. That might be,
I don't
yeah, you know, yeah, you know, you had to get accepted to both. But so the answer basically, Olivia, is we don't really have it. I mean, some of us have colleagues that teach in the Faculty of Law and do collaborative work with them across the campus and research projects. But Faculty of Law is its own entity in the sense, such as, you know, similar to the Monk School of Public Policy. And they are distinct admissions programs and distinct programs with also different, you know, distinct tuition and whatnot. But certainly, you know, some of the issues that we're dealing with in terms of digital policy, of course, are very related to law. But so hopefully that answers your question. Yeah.
Certainly from certainly from a policy point of view, legal aspects, and particularly related to, and a culture point of view, legal aspects related to rights issues, intellectual property rights more generally, copyright more specifically, and are very important elements in courses such as The Future of the Book and Remix. And I think I would say that we don't take a Lawrence Lessig approach necessarily, but we do take a very activist approach that we need to change. We need change in these areas. So legal issues are important in both culture and technology and in CIPS, and you could actually go to the law school and take a couple of courses if you wanted. So, and that might be good.
We also have a collaborative specializations across the campus, and one I want to mention in particular has been very popular with some of the students I knew in CIPS, which was the one with the School of the Environment. And I had 2 students in CIPS, and at one point they did a reading course with me, and they focused on issues of information communication technologies and the environment. They both were in the co-op program, and they were doing co-ops at IS&D in Ottawa, which is Innovation, Science, and Economic Development. And they were both very keen on a lot of issues, regarding climate change, environmental issues, and ICTs. And they were doing some of their work in their co-op that led to them being even more interested in these issues. So they did collaborative specialization in environment, had to take 1 or 2 courses and do some sort of capstone project. But that was very interesting. So all to say is they did this in the second year when they were in the program, or at the end of the second year. So it's coming to a realization about taking certain courses, being particularly interested in particular topics, and just think, hey, how can I expand this knowledge base further? So taking the initiative, finding out different sorts of things that you could do across the campus is always a good thing. And often, after the first semester, some students switch. They decide they want to do something slightly different than what they started out intentionally coming to the program for. So that is a perfectly, understandable and wonderful trajectory. Mm-hmm. We also have a general program where students can essentially build their own program, with the approval of the Masters of Information Director, and often the approval and assistance of different concentration liaisons. So Seamus and I I guess were you ARM last year? Seamus, you represented Archives and Record Management. Yep. So Seamus was doing Archives and Records Management. I was doing CIPS. A particular student built a very interesting general program, taking bits and pieces from each of the concentrations, but also programs from architecture and programs from music. And this is all part of their particular professional, building a professional portfolio. And the student has done marvelously in the courses he's taken with me. So, very unique, so possible to do.
What about the co-op, Leslie? Milan asks about that.
I have had, yes, certainly I know with CIPS we've had students that have been in the co-op program. Now I can't speak very specifically about some elements of the co-op program. What I know of the students in CIPS that have gotten co-op positions, a lot of them have been able to work in Ottawa, and they've gone, as I mentioned, working at IS&D, so Innovation, Science, Economic Development. One worked for Public Works Canada, Public Security Canada, and then ended up through a variety of different mechanisms, is now a senior policy analyst for the Office of the Privacy Commissioner. So that's a really cool job that this former student deservedly has achieved. So pre-COVID days, I don't know what's happening vis-a-vis federal government co-op positions in COVID. I don't know. I don't work with the co-op folk here at the university. But pre-COVID, there were opportunities for students to move to Ottawa to do it either as a summer session or to do it for a longer 8-month session. And a couple of students did this, and they really enjoyed it. They got to work on some stellar files. They got to learn how to do scoping documents. They got to look at the sort of underwater internet cabling, policy, legal issues. They got to learn a variety of experiences, and folks in the federal government was so happy to get really engaged, dynamic students that we had to work there. There were some, I believe, also working in the Ontario Digital Service, ODS, of the provincial government. And ODS does some really excellent work. Sort of the nexus of user experience and policy is something that's really cool. So there were a lot of those sorts of experiences that students were able to get that I know of. But unfortunately, Milan, I can't give you a lot of the specifics of what has happened in the last year or what the current status is of co-op.
Okay. Okay, I guess so. Thank you, everyone who came, and
We still have a couple people here. We have Carol,
I think they need to go to their other session now, though.
Garima. Yeah, if they want to. I think Sydney. Yeah, people are jumping around. It's
Sure.
in pre-COVID days, we would be in the Inforum at tables, right? And you'd pick up a lot of chatter there. For the participants that are here, do you have questions, Carol or Garima, Milan, or Sydney?
Oh, it goes to 3 p.m. Okay, sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, it goes to 3 p.m. Yeah, thank you, Garima.
Sorry.
Garima, given your interest in CIPS, but also C&T, I'm wondering if there's another session that would be useful for you to attend to see that, to sort of get a better sense of the diversity of the program in terms of different sorts of approaches. What would you think if you're sort of CIPS and C&T, maybe ARM perhaps? Seamus, I'm just.
So, I mean, ARM is
Yeah,
also a very. Yes, Garmin, you may.
Yeah, please turn on your.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Leslie and Seamus, for this wonderful insight into the concentrations and how you deal with the contemporary issues and how you make them a part of your classroom interactions with students. It's been quite interesting and also exciting to hear about the issues that you tackle. I'm very interested in actually culture and technology and CIPS together because somehow during my master's program, these were the two areas that we really focused on, and they really struck a chord with me. And some of my research proposals there also centered around issues of privacy, surveillance, and I'm extremely also. I mean, I was just about to type. I hope you're all right, Seamus.
Thank you.
So yeah, so I also noticed that the university has a center, McLuhan Center, uh, that has very interesting projects, and I was wondering how that center taps into the culture and technology concentration. Are there any overlaps? Does the center work closely with this concentration here? Just wanted to understand this bit as well about how this works.
I can start answering about the McLuhan program in culture and technology. There are a couple of courses that have been taught at the Coach House when pre-pandemic, and they were smaller seminar courses that did have a bit of an educational focus to what the center does. I'm thinking about Alessandro Del Fonte's digital labor course, for instance, and I believe maybe Taro Carpi's critical social media course was being offered there, and Sarah Sharma, who's the director of the program, was teaching a feminist media studies program there. The programming that Professor Sharma has been doing as director has been fantastic, very focused on intersectional issues in terms of culture and technology writ large, bringing together scholars, policymakers, community activists, and it's like a very small, literally small house, but for the Monday night seminars, it would be packed room only in most instances in terms of the programming. So I would say is creating a really dynamic community hub for students and the rest of U of T community and City of Toronto. It's been really great. But I also want to mention other sorts of events that are other sorts of things at U of T. There's the Schwartz Riesman Center for Technology and Society that is headed up by Jillian. I'm just blanking on her last name. Seamus, help me out here. I know Jillian Hadfield,
Hadfield,
who's a professor and faculty of law. And that is increasing their programming in terms of putting on a variety of different sorts of events and speaker series. Well, focused a lot on, obviously, artificial intelligence. It's covered a lot of other different sorts of tech issues in general. There's also the Center for Ethics at the U of T that has done fabulous programming on all sorts of issues related to technology, culture, society, and ethics that brings in a lot of established scholars, community organizers, but also has a junior scholars forum. So folks are participating in that. So there's diverse centers at U of T where there's lots of programming and events that students can participate in. There's so much this semester. It's sort of overwhelming how many different seminars there are between the Schwartz Riesman, between and thinking of the Massey College, Seamus, and other sorts of events
Yeah.
that I can't do it all the time. It's all 9 to 5,
But
and
you see,
often, yeah,
so from a C&T point of view,
yep,
if I could interrupt for 1 second.
yeah,
From a C&T
absolutely,
point of
yep,
view,
yep,
culture and tech, the McLuhan Center is a core learning opportunity for our students, and an opportunity for them to engage, because Professor Sharma has done an amazing job at catalyzing the intellectual research in the area of culture and technology across North America and beyond, and bringing those scholars to events at the Coach House, virtual, physical until recently, but then now more virtually. And these expand your opportunities to engage with the intellectual shape and tradition of the discipline, and to pick up new ways of seeing, new ways of knowing, and seeing new directions in which the field is actually going. So I think that's very important. And so it's a great add-on to the program itself.
absolutely, absolutely, and it's also creating venues to meet students that are in different concentrations, but also our doctoral students as well. So there's great doctoral student participation. So it builds a robust community, which is excellent. And then, often at the faculty we have colloquium series, we have guest speakers. There's the Digital Curation Institute so Professor Christoph Becker has always very interesting folks coming in to talk about various issues, real focus now on sustainability and the environment. There's the Technoscience Research Unit headed up by Michelle Murphy. There's the Knowledge Media Design Institute headed up by Sarah Sharma, and the Matt Rado's Critical Making Lab. So there's this excitement and generation of interesting events and topics and talks that cross over CIPS and C&T. Yeah, thank you, Garima, for your comments. Your questions are great. So you can follow up, Garima, with an email with me if you'd like. And I'm just thinking, I'm thinking that maybe ARM would be a good, if you want to explore other breakout rooms. I'm thinking maybe archives and records management, maybe human-centered data science.
You see, actually, I think either the combination of CIPS with human data science, or the combination of CIPS with or C&T with human data science would be really good.
Yeah, actually, Garima, Seamus is teaching a course this semester in the human-centered data science concentration that I taught last year called Human Values in Data Science. And I had lots of CIPS students, and I had quite a few C&T students as well in that class. It's a required course for those students in that concentration. Focuses, widely on social policy, ethical, humanistic, philosophical perspectives. But you're absolutely right, Seamus. It would add professionally a really exciting element because you come with your background in media governance and journalism and some tech expertise, because they need people that know the tech, but they also need people that know the social, cultural, and policy issues to work in organizations. They need those interdisciplinary teams. So you might find that to be interesting. It's something that you might not have thought about, right? Yeah, thank you, Garima. Yeah, and do email me, but I think that would be a great, yeah, it would be a great, goes nicely together. So we just have, how are you doing, Nicole? You hanging in there?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. It's a great discussion that you guys are having. It's really nice to hear everything with CIPS and CNT.
I think it works well having us together, don't you, Seamus?
I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I
mean,
agree.
we still get the less number of people. I had 6. Maybe we'll have a total of 8 that have showed up for our session. But I think it works well together. We can bounce off of each other. I used to do it with Alan Gailey, and would bounce off of each other when he was doing CNT.
No, I think it's really good, and I like all of the participants who have came so far. They have really great questions as well.
They do. Their questions have been very, very good. Very, very good. I agree.
Fantastic.
Yeah. It's almost like you want an FAQ, right? Develop an
Yep.
FAQ about the questions. To put together. I'm just hanging out here, seeing what's happening.
Yeah, I think this goes until 3 p.m. and then I think next up is tours and admissions, I think.
Then once I do this, I have all sorts of reference letters to write today.
Oh, really?
Me
Do
too.
you?
Oh yeah,
Wow.
December 1st deadlines. Indeed. Indeed, and I could be sitting here, doing some marking or something like that. But whatever.
Hey, Leslie, just on those, just for the students who are still here. Oh, nobody's still here. Leslie, on those letters.
Well, no, somebody's here. Carol's here. Carol Choi's here. If we look, we have 4 participants. Carol's here.
Oh, I'm showing. Okay, on those letters.
Which
I think
ones?
that's the important thing for students to know, that we're always
Oh,
engaged in writing letters to support students for scholarships and other funding opportunities and awards and so forth. It's a big part of the activity of being a professor in the program.
absolutely. Absolutely. I do lots of, I have quite a few to write. Students applying for external awards, students applying for PhD programs, quite a few this year, more so than others, it seems. Other former PhD students applying for programs. I have a list. I have a little post-it list. It's like, oh, when is it due? December 1st. When's December 1st? Oh my goodness. Right?
So it's
Yeah.
exactly the sense I get.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if you're there, Seamus. Carol, do you have a question? I know you're toggling back between rooms, and I'm not sure if you have a specific question you would like to ask us or put in the chat, whatever. Oh, let's see. There is a chat. Okay, I'm looking at the chat. Toggling between rooms. Okay. So, Carol, overlap between what do you find most common among CIPS students for the overlap of concentrations? Initially, it used to be ARM, Archives and Records Management, and then it used to be Library and Information Science Studies. Now I would say there's no one concentration that there's more of than others, but I would say user experience, UX, and now HCDS are the concentrations, and CNT. Like there are those that do, they either do CNT, SIPS and CNT, SIPS and archives, SIPS and library, SIPS and UX, SIPS and human-centered data science now, but they rarely are doing SIPS and IS&D or SIPS and knowledge KMIM. We still have KMIM. So many concentrations, it's hard to keep track at times, right? But often, students, dip into a SIPS class or two, I find. I'm not sure about CNT, Seamus. Generally speaking, because of, there's CNT1 and CNT2, so once students do CNT1, they're going to take CNT2, and they're sort of committed to CNT.
Yeah, I would, if you took just CNT1, it would give you some valuable knowledge base you could use in other contexts, but once you've taken CNT1, I see it pretty likely that you'll take CNT2. Because that really coalesces the ideas that you learned in CNT1.
Yeah, I would say so. Great question, Carol. SIPS tends to fold into a PhD. I'd say it's not necessarily because of the theoretical nature of policy studies. I just happen to know a lot of students that have been in SIPS that have gone into the PhD. And they've gone into the PhD elsewhere, and they've gone into the PhD in our program. And many of these students have done theses. Not all of them, yeah. So I think it could be sort of the way that you can do theory and a bit of more. I'm just more contemporary issues in technology and society that have done this. I'm thinking. Let's see. I'll mention. We have a student. One of our PhD students did a thesis looking at ways that the Ontario government was doing public consultation, and now is doing a PhD thesis that's exploring in more detail a bit about issues of structures of participation, but looking at different ways that civic tech and civic tech groups are doing policy. One of our students did a thesis on the surveillance infrastructure of the Xbox, Microsoft's Xbox, and is now doing a really interesting thesis looking at different ways that hacking events are designed for security consultants. Security experts do these sorts of hacking events, and that's what they're doing. One of my students defending very soon did a thesis looking at how the internet was being used as an essential service in a Native men's residential center in Toronto, and their dissertation is looking at the essential role the internet plays in community housing in Toronto. So often it's sort of a continuation of a master's thesis, but not always a thesis, but master's to a PhD. But I happen to know more about them. I'm not sure about, I think, there probably were some CNT students at the master's level that then pursued doctoral work. Seamus, perhaps.
I'm not, part of the problem with doctoral studies is that actually we have very few places in the Faculty of Information now. We've had a couple of banner years where we had big numbers when there was a slight expansion, but the government of Ontario has been parsimonious and has cut back the amount of resources for expansion of doctoral programs. So we haven't been able to expand ours in the past 2 years, which is unfortunate because where you now into a doctoral program, there's something like a 1 in 8 or 1 in 10 chance of getting a place, which is hugely difficult. Or if you are if you're not a permanent resident or a citizen of Canada, it's a 1 in 40 or 1 in 50 chance of getting a place in the program, because we have very few international places. But certainly, both CIPS and CNT, they do provide an intellectual framework that would be very conducive to going on to pursuing doctoral studies afterwards. And the questions that we're asking are worthy of exploration in doctoral research, which for me is a hallmark of a good doctoral program, one that asks questions that are culturally and socially relevant. So it's a good thing to come from, but
our students do go on to pursue doctoral degrees while it's a professional degree. If they don't write a thesis, and we don't have that many students writing theses, they have tended to do very well in going off in doctoral studies. But yeah, great question. Thank you, Carol. That's a great, Carol, that's a great commentary. Absolutely. It's I would say, I think there's a really great opportunity in Canada now to do policy work and to do policy research, and the openings might be more fulsome. I'm thinking about reading the Telecommunications and Broadcasting Review and the report that came out in January 2020, so looking at whether or not these two pieces of legislation that are very outdated should be brought together, and it was called the Yale Report. So thinking about the merger of telecommunications and broadcasting policy, and one of the things that came out of the report is saying we need to rethink the role of the CRTC and call, I think, Canada's Communications Center or something like that. Anyway, reframe it, basically do a rebrand. But we need to have much more focus in that organization to do the actual research about the policy issues. So that to me indicates that they need to be able to educate policymakers and be policymakers that are conversant with these issues. But I'm also thinking about the Office of the Privacy Commissioner that has a particular group within it that's comprised of computer scientists and data scientists. So they're under the hood of the technologies, figuring stuff out. They're under the hood looking at, what might be the sort of, proprietary impact of algorithms. So I think that you're absolutely right, thinking about a lot of, they're politicians. So, what do politicians know anyway in many instances? Thinking or how our tech CEO is trying to obfuscate the issues. But given all of the sort of fulsome tech reg stuff happening globally, it's pretty exciting. Carol, I can't tell you, do they go? I think I think more of them go into the public sector, but I think there's other opportunities in the private sector as well, because for instance, you need privacy officers that work in industry organizations. That work, that work in various sorts of industry organizations. Or you need somebody that's working in the private sector in a tech company, but can be the person that's that knowledge translator for various issues.
We're able to support the implementation of systems by understanding the cultures of organizations into which you're bringing new information systems. The take-up of technology is often constrained or made ineffective, not by weaknesses in the technology, but by failures of the organization to understand how a particular technology creates culture change within the organization, or a failure to harness culture change that's already happening to make a technology more exciting or more engaging.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. But yeah, it's great. It's a great question. It's a great question, and I think there's opportunities present themselves because the fast-moving nature of the technology. So opportunities for, for instance, IS&D, and yes, that's the public sector, had a AI lab and looking at AI policy and ethics issues. So 5 years ago, they wouldn't have had this, obviously. So. Combined program of CNT and CIPS. Yep, there are students that do that. MI and MMST.
Yeah.
So the collaborative. I don't know. Do you know, Seamus?
Not who've done this. I don't know anyone who's done these two concentrations in conjunction with the MMST, but certainly either one of them combined with museum studies would be equally valid and useful. It's a long, hard slog to do the combined program between MI and MMST. It's 3 years and it's very challenging, but certainly if you have the stamina for it, that's a great combination to have. In particular, I would argue because it helps you to understand a relationship between what we might in the in modernist terms describe as a world of textuality that sees text not just as written documents, but sees physical objects, such as my coffee cup here, as a text to be read in some way, or what is a stapler as a text, or what is a brooch that you see someone wearing, or our glass is a text. And so when you combine issues we talk about in the MI with issues that we might talk about in museum studies, you can really begin to see new kinds of perspectives. So it is, and the students who've done that combination have really spoken very highly of it.
They have.
But it is a hard slog.